Joining us this morning for VCE Ag Today. It's just after 9 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Pleased to be joined this morning again by Dr. David Holshouser, our extension soybean agronomist with Virginia Cooperative Extension and Virginia Tech. And David's going to be sharing some information today on a new database, a multi-state database that has been funded by the U.S. Soybean Board, and he's going to be talking about some soybean variety selection and all the data that's been put into that database for you to be able to use to find important information on soybean varieties to help you choose good varieties for your farms. So before we get started this morning, just a few housekeeping comments. As always, if you could please remain muted until the end of the presentation. We'll open it up for conversation and questions at the end. If you think of a question, feel free to enter that into the chat window, and we'll get to that as well. And then also throughout the presentation, we ask folks, again, to please be muted if at all possible, so we don't have any interruptions or background noises. So David, I appreciate you being here this morning, and you can go ahead and get started.
Okay, well, thank you, Robbie. I appreciate you having us again. I do want to speak to you primarily about this. It's what we're calling the MidSouth Variety Trial Database that myself and 4 other soybean agronomists that have variety testing responsibilities have developed over the last year. And what that basically allows you to do is it summarizes this into a computer database, but it's for all 5 states. And I'll go into the details of it later. But one of the things I've continually hear, especially for people on the border of other states, is that, well, it'd be nice to include, North Carolina's or Maryland's data or Delaware's data into this, give us a better sense of how the varieties I'm using are doing throughout the, the region. Or maybe I don't need to have a southerly location. Or I don't want to look at all your publication, look at all the 5s or everything and sort through all of this. And maybe I'd like to just pick the brands that I deal with. So that's what we tried to do with this. It will allow us to really, it's already allowed me to really help me pick out the varieties that are standing out. Now, before I get into that, let me reinforce that my variety test, as well as the others, and the database I'm showing you today, is based on yield. While yield is critical and it's the most important, what goes into that yield is beyond just the genetics. So my philosophy is, when you're selecting varieties, first of all, look at your maturity groups. I think Virginia's mainly late 4s, some early 5s. 5s are more through the south. We are growing some 3s, early 4s, and even 6s throughout the state. But it's good to spread that out. That becomes even, those maturities out. This year is a good example of that, where we had the good summer rains and then it turned dry in September, which is probably going to hurt our double crop and later maturing varieties. I'm already seeing some of that. But we can have just opposite next year, which we have a dry July, August, and then get rains in September. Actually, our double crop plantings have been as well, if not better yielding than our full season, maybe 3 out of the last 5 years, just because of that scenario. So that's the main thing, choose those. In this situation, we're looking at late 4s, maybe some early 5s. That's going to be the bulk of our varieties, but it's always good to put in a few early 4s or even 3s and maybe some late 5s and something later to spread out that risk. The other thing is, the traits that we're looking at. I think Mike Fleshner's on the line today. He and I, we've talked about this. This is getting, the herbicide traits are getting somewhat complicated, almost as complicated as some of the corn and insect tolerant traits. At one time we had, I think, 10, maybe 12 different types of herbicide traits. That's consolidating now, though, with the XtendiFlex and the Enlist varieties, which allow us to apply for the Enlist, it'd be 2,4-D, Liberty, and Roundup, and then the XtendiFlex would be Liberty, Roundup, and glyphosate. I shouldn't say just Roundup, glyphosate, glufosinate or Liberty, and 2,4-D for those enlist varieties. So that seems to be constant. That made up about, I would say, 70 to 80% of the varieties I tested this year. We still have some Liberty links. We have some Liberty links, glyphosate tolerant soybean, and those will continue. I don't know if those would be cheaper if you don't have that. I'll just say the 2,4-D or dicambitrate in it. It's possible. Some of those are very good. And then we still have some conventionals going into the test, and that's largely university. So that kind of, but I think as everything's consolidating back to something we can use, glufosinate or Liberty and glyphosate or the Roundup and the generics that go with that. And then finally, nematode resistance. Our nematodes are becoming more and more of a problem, I think. It's kind of the silent killer we've got out there, that silent yield robber right now. But my experience is you don't see much of a yield loss, and all of a sudden it blows up. So root knot nematode and cyst nematode are our biggest culprits, but we have a lot more out there too. So all that needs to go into your variety selection before we really start looking at yield. But with that said, yield's the most important topic, and we're all interested in genetics. So your selection on your genetics should, first of all, look at these other factors, and then let's go into which genetics within those categories are the most, the highest yielding. We have harvested our group 3s and most of our 4s in most locations. We've harvested our group 5s in our southern Piedmont location near Blackstone. We will likely harvest our group 5s today on the eastern shore, weather permitting. We need a little sunshine and wind so we can get that in today. Just looking at the data right now in Warsaw, the late 4s and early 5s are our highest yielding variety there this year. I don't have the exact bushels per acre calculated, but they're yielding all 6, 7, 8% greater than the 3s and early 4s. Now, if you go further south to where I'm located now in Suffolk, we've not harvested our 5s yet, but the 3s are doing just as well as the early 4s and the late 4s. Now, that's very unusual for a southeastern location. And on average, the 3s don't do well, but it tells you our weather this year. Had a lot of rain, maybe excessive rain on poorly drained soils in Suffolk, and then turned dry in September. I don't suspect our 5s to yield quite as well. And I thought I saw that at Blackstone when I was riding the combine looking at seed size, because in Blackstone, we were basically, our early 4s, late 4s, early 5s were yielding very good. They were yielding, I would say, around 70 bushels per acre. And we didn't see a drop until the late 5s. But even when I was looking at the late 4s and early 5s, I was seeing a lot of small seed come in. You go in and look at these pods, that September drought. We've got 3 seed pods out there. Many of those only contain 1 or 2 seed, in some case 1 seed, especially in those later maturing varieties. And those later maturing varieties seed are small. So I was a little surprised to see the 5 yields holding up as well as the 4s. And that makes me think, wow, if we'd have got those September rains, we'd have really had a bumper crop on the 5s. But with that said, the late 5s might have had a couple of 6s in on that test. They were yielding, about 10 to 15% lower than the early 5s and anything earlier. So that kind of tells you that weather scenario. Again, that's the importance of spreading those maturity groups out. Okay, no further ado. I'm going to share my screen. And for those of you on a phone, I would suggest maybe watching the recording of this because you really need to look at the screen to get the full aspect of this. Hopefully everyone's seeing, and let me know, Robbie, if you're seeing this MidSouth soybean variety trial website.
Yeah, David, we can see the map.
Very good. This is what myself and others from Tennessee, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Kentucky, and along with us in Virginia created last year. We worked on this. We consolidated 3 years of variety testing programs from those other states just like mine. The screen you see here are the locations that we have those variety trials. So let me explain the website. Well, first of all, we were able to get funding from the United Soybean Board. That's checkoff dollars. That's the national funding to get this thing started. We were hoping to continue funding for another year, maybe create a phone app that's easy to use. That would have taken probably even more money than what we did here. But they decided not to fund us the second year. It's kind of odd because we probably had 5 more states that wanted to become involved with this. But the good thing is we've got the foundation set up for this. So I think we can move on for this. And as I said earlier, this will allow you not only to look at variety testing data in Virginia or close by, but for other regions. And again, these are all the variety testing sites in those areas that we see. I'll give you an overview of the website. This is showing you the map. This shows you on the right of all the varieties tested, in this case, the last 3 years, how each of those did, average yield difference. So in other words, this agri gold, now we didn't test that. I don't know how many places it was tested, but it yielded 25% greater than the average of all the other varieties in that maturity group, in that relative maturity. So it's not comparing 4s to 5s or 5s to 3s or anything like that. Anytime you see something this great, though, I question, something's happening there. But then you can see the varieties and how they're stacking up to each other. We can scroll up and we can even go to the top and see which ones yielded poorly, up to 8 bushel less than average. And any place in between, there's various functionality to this that allow you, choose how many varieties you want to look at once. And, here are the average ones. Here are the average ones in between. And that's kind of how it looks there. So let's go on back to the top. Everybody likes to see, the highest yielding varieties. And it gives you a list of this. On the bottom, it'll actually give you all these data. So if you really want to dive into the data, I assume Virginia is going to be at the bottom. We can come down here and look at, how this Dynagrow 56XT99 did. Relative maturity is a 5.6, maturity group, yield difference, it nearly 5 bushel greater than average. That's the yield at Warsaw. And we can look at all the locations. You could look at some Arkansas locations as well as others. Now, the key to this and what makes this very valuable is this selection, this filter we've got up here. Okay, this is showing 3 years of data, 5 states, multiple locations. You say, well, I'm not sure I'm going to trust this Kentucky data. That's getting into Midwestern soils, and down in Arkansas, we're along that river bottom there, the Mississippi River bottom. We know those are really good soils there. A lot of this is irrigated, so maybe I want to throw those out, but maybe I don't. But another thing, well, I don't want 3 years of data. I mean, what we were testing 3 years ago wasn't there. So the first thing you come to, let's just select the last 2 years of data. And again, we don't have 2021 data in, but we hope to, this winter. And if you noticed when I did that, this changes the number of varieties you see here, or the rankings. And I'll say, well, I'm not sure I want to use, let's just go Virginia and North Carolina. Okay. So let's turn that filter on, and you'll notice that now we're just looking at, well, we should be just looking at Virginia and North Carolina data. And then we can even go into those data in Virginia and North Carolina. And I say, well, this Blackland site here, and we can actually click on these bubbles of Pasquotank. That's really not too bad, but there's a Blackland site down here, Beaufort County. These are the organic soils. Let's just get rid of that one because those are those 80 bushel soils that are, let's go ahead and, well, let's get rid of that one, but let's just choose, all the others. Eastern Shore double crop, orange, and Pasquotank County. Yeah, I like Pasquotank. That's Eastern North Carolina. And Rowan, that's the county I'm from. Sampson County is our biggest county. So there's Suffolk. Maybe we don't want Union County because that's getting a little far south. That's down in this area of North Carolina. And of course, we want Warsaw. And we'll go with Yadkin County as well. Okay, so that's going to give us these sites. The only thing I really eliminated was that organic soil there. So now we go to years planted. You know, do I really care anything about things that were not tested in 2020? Maybe not. So I'm going to just look at varieties that we tested in 2020. And not look at the varieties that were only tested in 2019. So, and then we can do the last 2 years. We could even specify, well, I actually want those, I want more data. So I want a good set of data. So I want to look at 2 years of data, but let's just, since we had all the newer varieties, I'm only going to look at, you know, varieties planted last year. And, you know, you can come down more filters, but let's leave that as it is. Now, here's what I like. Most growers that call me, they say, well, which varieties should I plant? I said, well, who are you dealing with? I mean, tell me the companies that you're dealing with. They may say Asgrow, Axis. And again, when I do that, now you're only going to see the Asgrow and Axis varieties there. Beck, we don't deal with Beck. I don't know, one of your agents, give me another brand of varieties and we'll check that. Nobody wants to participate, anyone? About local seed. We're seeing a lot more local seed around. So we'll just look at local, Asgrow, and so forth. Let's turn that filter back on. Now here's the key, and this is where we get into variety tolerance. Okay, I want to look at everything. Nah, I'm only interested in stuff that's got that are Roundup ready. So let's look at that. Glufosinate. If I were to turn that on too, that's going to really knock these varieties, number of varieties down, because we just were not testing that much XtendiFlex last year. We did a lot of enlist, so that basically knocks it down to the enlist. That'll be very different once we put this year's data in. Dicamba, well, I don't really care if it's got dicamba or not, or maybe I do. Let's make sure we get only the dicamba beans. That will just show those, but just for my purposes, I'm not going to put any of that in. You want irrigated, there's soil texture things. I'm going to leave all of this there. I'm not real big on looking at only soil texture because my opinion is the environment, which includes the soil from last year, more important than just whether or not it was a clay or a sandy loam. You can only choose double crop planting full season if you want to, but I want to look at all the data. Now I've skipped over this, but I want to come back to it. We selected 3 brands. Now we can go into those varieties and select which varieties we want to use, but you're seeing some group 2s, group 3s. Let's just go relative maturity. And let's say I want to just see the bulk of my varieties that I'm going to plant. So let's go 4.5, 4.6, 7, 8, 9, and so forth. Let's not get too late into the 5s, but you know, I may want to plant a few 5s around. So now we're only looking at group 5s. And this is how these things are ranking out. You know, those varieties we select local seeds up here. There's the 48X9 from Asgrow. Has done well over the years. I'm not surprised to see it there, and a few more Asgrows and Axis. And of course, well, let's throw another company in here. Yeah, let's throw MidSouth genetics in there. Just looking at that. Now we're seeing a few more, and actually some of the MidSouth genetics have topped the local seed, but you know, this is probably not that different, significantly different. So anyway, whoops. I don't know what I went to the soybean board homepage. Let's not do that. I'm going to minimize this just so I can give us a little more room. But anyway, we can go through all that. Now here's the yield percentage. You say, well, I don't really want to deal with something that's yielding that's less than average. So let's put 0.5 in at least and only look at the good varieties and turn that on. Well, that's gonna change this as well. I'm only looking at varieties that, or this is, well, it's percentile. So this would give you, it's much better than average, which really is, it's even better than average. If we go back down to 0.1, we're going to see a lot more varieties here. And of course, we can scroll up here and see the ones that didn't do as well. And maybe that's what you want to look at and say, oh yeah, I planted this 5016 last year and had it doing a variety test, or somebody's wanting to sell me something. So anyway, that's it. I'm ready to open this up for questions. I'll take, if you want to type your question in or ask something, if you want me to change something on this, we can do it. So anyway, that's where I am right now. Any comments or questions?
David, I'll jump in and just say it looks like a pretty fun, powerful tool there. I was wondering about STS or bolt tolerance in there. Would that be coming in the future, particularly for people wanting to double crop behind some wheat that use those herbicides?
That's a good comment. Matter of fact, I'm gonna write that down. Let me say that we're still in development of this, so we are trying to improve it. So yeah, that's a good comment. If we're coming in behind wheat or something, we have not done that, but we could. I think we're going to have to. Every variety is a little different in the way they. There's a good example. It's MidSouth Genetics XTX. That's extend with sulfonylurea tolerance. They don't always just have the S. Some of them say STS and so forth. So that'll take us a little time, but that's a very good comment. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I hate to be nitpicky because you've got so much in here, but one more thing is, one more thing to add, but I think that could be useful.
Well, and we've got to find some more funding for this so we can keep our programmers hired, I think. But that's a good comment. The other thing I want to point out, if you may be able to see at the top of my screen, I just typed in MidSouth soybean variety test. Our searching capabilities are not what I want them to be yet, because it really doesn't give this as the first. Of course, you got to get more people to use it. You'll see a lot of variety testing, but where you want to go to is the UT Crops webpage. That's University of Tennessee. She is the scientist there. And if we can get back to the dashboard, it's going to start everything over, I imagine. But Virginia Sykes at the University of Tennessee has led our project. And that's the one that, and I thought her name was down here someplace, but maybe not. Yeah. And there's some links to our variety testing, which I need to get mine up there. Virginia Sykes have led this, and she's got programmers hired. So we'll probably meet in another month. So any other comments like that's really what we're looking for. But I would like to go back to this website because MidSouth Soybean Variety Database Survey, we've got a survey on here. Please, take the survey. If I can figure out how to get it surveyed by, but I haven't been on this site in a while. Yeah, the survey can be found here, and it'll go through some simple questions. You agree, next. So we really want that information, which states Georgia. I'm just selecting things at random. how many soybean acres and so forth. So, you know, just anybody that uses this, we'd like to get some feedback on it. And Mike, if right now, that'd be great if you could go in that survey and put that in. That would at least keep me from forgetting to remind people, but I think I'll remember that. Any other comments or questions?
I did have one other question, you know, with potential shortages of glyphosate and glufosinate or Liberty and prices going up. Any thoughts about it? If you have a market for non-GMO beans, is that a, you know, I thought you could use this tool for selecting conventional varieties. Would that be something you've thought about yet or would recommend people trying to capitalize on that?
You can use this tool just for selection of conventional, which would be conventional herbicides only. So there you go. You know, we've got a few in the state available. MidSouth Genetics has one developed from Virginia Tech's program. You could probably still find some of the older varieties. There's not a lot around. I know Dr. Zong has, I think that Purdue may be marketing a variety now for organic production that she developed. And quite honestly, the ones that are developed in Virginia Tech are probably going to be your best ones for Virginia, just in as far as yields go. That's what we've seen. There are some varieties though, but you know, the thing is, and maybe I should start requesting that from companies. I'm trying to look through here and see if there's any companies. There's a seed consultant variety, but most of these are university. There's MidSouth, that's Ellis. That's one of theirs. They've got another one that 5618, that's a 5.6. So there's a few companies that have them, but those are getting really few and farther between. Well, I'm gonna stop my sharing, which hopefully I did. But anyone that's on the call or maybe listening to it later, you know, go onto this database, the website. I can get you that, but the easiest thing is just type in MidSouth soybean variety test and go to the Tennessee site until we can get our search engines working a little better. So Robbie, if there's no other questions, I appreciate you having me today, and I'll try to get back to harvesting.
All right. Well, thank you, David. I don't see any other questions in the chat. That link has been posted in the chat, David. Stephanie mentioned that link in the chat. So for those on the call, if you go into the chat window, you'll see the direct link to this platform to find this data. So thank you again, everyone, for being with us. Again, the meeting this morning has been recorded, so we'll post that to our playlist on YouTube, which you see there on the screen where the recording link is at the bottom. If you need help finding that, just reach out to any of the agents involved with the program. We'll be happy to get it to you. Again, thank you for everyone that's joined us this morning. Thank you, David. For those that are with us on the screen, you can see the list of production team agents that help with this program. Stephanie Ramochek, Laura Maxine, Trent Jones, and Frank Long. So without their efforts, the program wouldn't be possible. So thank you to those folks as well. And one last time, thank you to our speaker today, Dr. David Holshouser, for sharing this resource. So hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday, and we'll be back week after next for another session of VC Ag Today. If you would, please fill out our evaluation. It'll take just 30 seconds of your time to let us know if you've got a topic of interest or anything that you'd like seen covered on the program, and we'd be happy to try to do that for you. So thank you again. Hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday.